Well, here we go again. Hey, the part we're going to focus on today is this thing here. It's a skills generating exercise, so by the time you finish you should be able to do a whole bunch of lathe skills. So we're just going to make this spinning top. It looks a bit like this. We have a schematic here which has some more specific details, and you see it's got some measurements across here. They are all in millimeters. So this becomes this. We have a number of steps to work through. The first thing we need to do is put a piece of work in the lathe, grip it in the chuck, looks a bit like that. We need to face the end off, and then we're going to mark it out with those measurements. And now the measurements come from there, 6, 3, 4 and 10. Same over here, 6, 3, 4 and 10, marked across here, and we're going to mark that by putting some ink on, and then we'll move on. So number 1, face, number 2, mark out. Number 3, we're going to parallel turn, and we're going to parallel turn down to diameter 14, and that's actually that diameter there, which actually is not on the plan yet. And what do you know? Now it is there, the 14. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is to mark out the 6mm line, because we actually got rid of it when we parallel turn. Parallel turn is to create that parallel surface. Then we're going to taper turn, and we're going to knurl, and then we're going to part a small way through, and then we're going to bevel all the corners, which means taking all the sharp corners off. And then we're going to finish the handle part down to diameter 4, and then we're going to part it off, and then we have a finished product. Right, we're going to take our piece of brass, and as you can see, the piece of brass has got a sawn surface on here. It's been cut off. You may start with a piece which is longer than this, but we would not cut them to the length that we want straight away, because we're going to use a lathe to do that for us. So we're going to put it in the lathe. We want it protruding about 25, 26 millimeters. That should be enough, so we can do all of the work on that. First step is to put the lathe on the correct speed. We are working with diameter 25 brass, so it's 25 across from there to there. We have a chart on the wall over there. Or can we see it? Yes, we can. So at the top we've got a number of materials: mild steel, tool steel, brass. We're looking at the brass. So follow down here, it's diameter 25, so we're looking at that 24 line. That's close. This is 625 RPM, and so that's what we would do here. We would set the speed on the nearest to that, and at the moment I've got it set on 755, so that should be fine. And it's in the red. So this handle here should be on the red, and this handle here has got a pointer on it. It's worn off a little bit, but that's the speed we want there. Okay, so let's go back to, so the first step on our chart was facing, so we'll turn our lathe on. We're going to move the cross slide, moving across nice and slowly until we get to the middle or the center. And when we get to the center, it should be finished, and we'll end up with a polished, well, a virtually polished surface, because the tool has just been sharpened, so we should end up with a really nice finish. Well, this is called facing because we're creating a smooth face. There we go, we are finished. And as you can see, we have a smooth, shiny surface, which is ready for the next stage. Now we're going to take our odd lead calipers, and we're going to look at our measurements again. Let's get our measurements sorted out. Okay, so over the side you can see we're going to put our measurement of 6, and then 3, and then 4, and then 10. We'll put all those measurements onto our piece of work. To make it easier to see, we'll put some ink on, and so we'll just put some ink on like that. It doesn't have to go all the way around, and it means that when we put a small scratch, it's going to be very easy to see. Now we're going to take our odd lead calipers, and our first measurement is 6. So we're going to put the hooked end of the odd lead calipers over the end, and we're going to set the scribing point on 6 millimeters, which is there. We're going to turn our lathe on, and we'll put that scratch on. Now the next measurement is going to be 3, so we'll add that to the first one, so that makes 9. Because we do all our measurements from the very end. And then another 4. My mathematics doesn't let me down, that makes it 13. And finally another 10 for the handles. 13 and 10 gives us 23. 23. Okay, there we go. So we've got all our marks on there. You can see that on there. See them quite clearly. So we had a 6, a 3, a 4 and a 10 all the way across here. So we're now going to parallel turn the first 9 millimeters. So we're going to parallel turn those first 2 areas down to diameter 14. Now when we're parallel turning, we're going to be moving this hand wheel here very slowly so that it moves the tool across. And it's going to move across the outside surface, and we're going to go from there to the 6, and then we're going to keep going another 3, and so that'll make a total of 9 millimeters. We need a couple of more tools. We've got these tools here. This is a pair of outside calipers. We've got a steel rule in millimeters. You notice the graduations are not always so the first number there, 10, represents 10 millimeters and so on. Okay, so let's set that. Now we need to set the outside calipers on the steel rule. You notice that this end of the steel rule reads 0, and so the end of the outside calipers needs to be right on the end of the steel rule. And then we can read off the measurement there, and we have it set on 14 millimeters. And so what we're going to do now, while it's running, we can actually check just by putting it over top of the work this way as we go. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so that's gone to 9 millimeters. We'll check it. No, miles to go yet. Take the tool in. It's going to do a little bit. We might be closer. No, more to go. Because we're getting a little bit closer, I'm just going to do a small amount on the end. I've actually gone a little bit too far. But as you can see from the plans, we're going to actually put a point on here, so that's not a problem. Is it right? Okay, so I'm now going to bring the tool back a little bit and carry on cutting. I'm going to check that, and as you can see, it just falls over with its own weight. So we're not forcing it, because we could force it, and it just means it forces these open a little bit. So we're just going to use the weight of the calipers, and that's pretty good where it is. Happy with that. Finish that off. Once again, go nice and slowly, otherwise we're going to end up ridges. Okay, so the next step is to change the angle of the tool so that we can put a point on it. So we need to do that by changing this arrangement here. Let's go back. So we have a number of degrees around here. We want to loosen the bolt here and this one around the other side. And we just loosen them like half a turn. And we're going to use a spanner off the rack. A spanner here. And we're going to use the open end because the ring end won't fit. And we'll just loosen it a little bit. This one around the other side, same. And then we can move this around. Let's get the other one a little bit looser. There we go. And there is a line. There's a very fine line there, and you probably can't see it on the camera. And there are some degrees around here. And we're going to set that on 45 and then lock it. Now this time, when we move the tool point here, it's going to move on an angle to the center of the lathe, and it's going to create the point. And we're going to use the compound slide, this one here. So we're not going to use the cross slide, and we're not going to use the hand wheel, although we may need to position the tool to start with, but we're going to mainly use the compound slide. And you can see the compound slide, you can see the angle of it. It's going to move across, it's going to move the tool in that direction, and that's going to give us that angled point. Right, so on the lathe goes, and we're going to start machining off just a small amount at a time. You can start to see an angle that's being... Now we're just doing our last cut. So it's taken about 5 or 6 cuts. And by cut, I mean that's every time you move the tool across the work. It's called a cut. And you see we've got a nice point. I'm moving nice and slowly and progressively, getting a good quality finish. I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to move the tool away from the work just so we don't scratch it. And so the next thing is we're going to put some knurling around there on the outside, and that creates a pattern. The idea of the pattern it really is to create a grip on something, and you can see on this little the nut on here that adjusts the thread on the outside calipers that this nut has actually been knurled. It's got a straight knurl on it, though there's little grooves in it. The knurl we're going to put on is like a diamond pattern. Alright, so this is the knurling tool, and you can see it's got these rollers, and each of these rollers has a diagonal impression which goes in opposite directions. So when you knurl, you end up with a diamond pattern as they cross over. We're going to put this tool in here. You just need to make sure there's no filings underneath where the tool is clamped, so the tool is clamped securely. We're going to put that in there, tighten that up. We've got this tool here. We use to tighten those. They don't need to be munty tight, just firm. Just firm. Because we've cleaned all the filings out from underneath, it's got a good contact and it's going to be clamped nice and tight. Now we need to rotate that around. Actually, before we do that, we'll just put a little bit of lube on that. So I'm going to use some WD-40. Now this stuff here, WD-40, just a thin oil. And this means that those rollers are well lubricated so we don't damage the tool, because it has to work quite hard. I'm going to rotate that around so that the tool now is at right angles to our piece of work. So I'm going to lock that up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to push this knurling tool. At the moment it's just touching and no more. And we're going to push it in with the cross slide, so that's going in that direction, pushing in that direction. But we do need to slow the lathe down. The lathe speed, the optimal speed was 625, so half of that. So we're looking around about 300 on our thing here, and there we go. We have actually got a 300 speed, so it's quite nice. And let's top it in the black. All right. So it's a little bit slower. Just going to check the angle, make sure it's pushing on the right angle. Okay. Just need to move it a little bit to get the angle right. In fact, I'm going to go slower than that. Quite like it really slow, so you can see the mark being made. And on she goes, making an impression. that off. And as we can see, I don't know if you can see from here, look, can I get a bit of focus? No, it's not going to cooperate. However, there is some knurling done on there. Right, now because of the knurling, I've actually started to make a mark in there with the parting tool, but before I did that I had to put the 4mm mark back on because the 4mm mark had been taken away by when I put the knurling on. So once again, set the odd lead calipers on 4, I scribed it on, then I swapped out this knurling tool for the parting tool, this one here, because the parting tool is the one that we use to cut work off, and we're going to use it to make a groove. So we don't want to cut it off yet, but we will eventually go down to diameter 4mm with this tool. But I only want to go in maybe 5 or 6mm, and then I'm going to use this control here to swivel the tool post, and then I'm going to bring the usual turning tool, the common turning tool. You notice the end of the turning tool has got a point on it like that, so we want it nice and even, so we can take it that way to remove a bevel and that way to remove a bevel, or to put a bevel on rather, to remove the sharp corner. So let's lock that in place. Now because things are quite close in here, you just need to be really careful and keep your hands clear. Alright, so we're going to bevel one side, like that, that's all we need to do. It's a very small bevel. I'm a bit cautious now because I'm getting closer to the chuck with the tools. And then we'll bevel the other side. Turn the lathe off so I can think about what's going on now. So we're going back to the parting tool, this one here, and we're going to go into diameter 4 as it says on the plans, and that part is going to become the handle. Now I'm going to speed the lathe up a little bit. I can go, for parting, we can go half the turning speed, so that's around 300. So I'm going to put it on 300. And there. I'm just going to go little by little. Take it all the way down to 4mm. And how do I know it's going to be 4mm deep? Well, I guess you've guessed it, we're going to use our outside calipers set on 4mm so that we can check down inside here when it is down to that size. Now we're almost here. I'm going to now check this while it's running. There we go, slides over, happy with that. Now we're just about to part it off completely, and as you can see we have the 4mm handle or spindle part in here, the part we spin with our fingers, the spinning top. So I'm just going to part that off completely, nice and slowly, feeding the tool across nice and slowly. Feed is when we're moving the tool across the work, and that's going to drop off. I wouldn't try and catch it, just let it fall by itself. There we go. There we go, and that's the part that we just made. There's a little bit of work we need to do around here just to take some of the sharp edges off. Unfortunately we can't do it in the lathe because we can't hold it anymore. We don't want to hold it by the knurling because that would spoil it. Alright, so I guess the only thing now is to check it out to see whether it actually works or not. So that's our little spinning top, and we have a bunch of skills in there. We have facing the end off, we have taper turning, we have knurling, and we have parting. Let's see if it works. Where is it? Yeah, it seems to be working quite good. A little bit wobbly. That's what I'm doing. Don't know what I'm doing very well. Long times. Alright, cheers.